In 317, the Lusitanian army invades Marion, one of Par's allies. The king of Pars, King Andragoras III, decides to help his ally by commanding 300,000 men to crush the Lusitanian army. They stack the bodies of the Lusitanian soldiers into a mountainous formation. In the palace, Varys, the supreme commander, instructs Prince Arslan, who is the crown prince of Pars. Prince Arslan is not making significant progress and is unable to maintain his position as Varys gains the upper hand. He advises him to familiarize himself with such things and become more serious, so that he can develop his fighting ability and perform better when engaged in combat. Yet, Arslan is cared for by two maids while simultaneously having a conversation with Varys. He complains that training is boring and asks Varys why he did not go with the king. He claims that while the monarch is away, it is his responsibility to watch over the royal capital of Ecbatana. Shortly after, he is guided by Varys to meet the queen. Getting there, he is addressed by the Queen Mother, also known as Tahemne. Not really grasping what she had told him, he makes an effort to pursue her and start a conversation, but she doesn't seem to care about what he has to say. This makes him wonder, what does it mean to be a good king? While Aslan strolls across the palace with Varys, Kishward, one of the cavalry captains of Pars, walks towards them. He informs the prince about their victory and the return of the king. The residents of Pars are filled with happiness, and they brighten the atmosphere of the arrival with cheers of victory. One of the Persian boys notices a young boy who had been captured from the Lusitanian army. He then asks his friend why such a young boy was allowed to go to war in the first place, to which he gets no reply. So, Arslan is ecstatic to see his father and tell him about his safe homecoming. Even so, his father is unfriendly toward him and insists that defeat was never an option. Later that day, Arslan goes into the town of Ecbanta with an accomplice from the palace, who is concerned that the prince is exposed to danger. Trouble brews as a result of this move. Yet, Arslan is not bothered at all, as he makes his way through the slave quarters of Ecbatana, with the intention of questioning Lusitanians on his own. He tries to talk to one of them, but they are adamant about keeping him locked up. Meanwhile, Edoil, the young child who had been captured, is currently being held in a small cage in a section of the quarters that is enclosed. He is put there as an attempt by three young Parsi lads to correct him for rejecting the Parsi culture. But the correction backfires on them as he beats them up. After beating up the Persian boys, Edoil manages to break free and tries to flee. Unfortunately for him, Arslan follows the sound of the guys until he runs into Edoil, who instantly threatens to kill one of the Persian boys if Arslan gets any closer to them. Arslan complies, at which point Edoil abandons the boy and goes after him instead, subsequently capturing him and leading him on a pursuit outside of the quarters. Parsian armies chase Edoil in a bid to rescue Arslan, even though Arslan saved Edoil's life by preventing him from falling off a giraffe, which would have resulted in his death. Edoil opens Arslan's eyes to many things about his people in a harsh manner when they were on the run. After a lengthy pursuit, the captain of the cavalry, Darian, finally catches up with Edoil and attempts to shoot an arrow at him. Edoil dodges the arrow, grabs one of the stray horses, and rides away. Arslan prevents him from aiming to the right, which ultimately results in Edoil being able to flee the scene. That evening, while Arslan is on his way to the palace, the Persian armies bring the three Persian boys, who are responsible for Edoil's escape, to Arslan for judgment. Arslan decides that the boys should be freed after hearing their case. Excited, they express an enormous amount of gratitude and swear that they will serve in the cavalry when they are much older. Meanwhile, Darian wants Arslan to meet one of his friends who can help, but Arslan says he believes that their town is safe as long as the king is alive. Thus, he claims it will be a while before he will need to meet his friend. After 3 years, Varys and Arslan are practicing inside the palace when, suddenly, Varys receives a message telling him that he and Arslan need to get ready for a battle that is about to take place. At the camp, Arslan becomes concerned as the weather begins to deteriorate, but Carlin reassures him by stating that he has conducted an adequate amount of research into the surrounding area. Arslan is accompanied by his three friends while the footmen, who are under his supervision, amble down to the area where the fogs are. Apparently, these three friends are the youngsters from 3 years ago whom he did not kill. They maintained their word and protected him as they had promised. As Varys approaches them, he cautions them to stay close to the camp and not wander too far away. Shortly after, Varys receives word from a courier that the king is quite displeased with Darian, who is also his nephew. Together with Arslan, he hastily makes his way to the camp. The king is so enraged that Darian advised him to withdraw from the conflict, because it could be a trap that he strips Darian of his title, but subsequently restores it to him after Varys makes a case for him. The time to fight arrives, and the horns are blasted, signaling everyone into position. During the battle, the Persian armies make a determined charge toward them as a terrible disaster loom in the distance. Yet, it turns out to be a trap, and the armies end up falling off a cliff and into a dungeon. This was a forceful charge that was difficult to stop. At this moment, other armies find it difficult to halt their armies from charging. Hence, balls of fire are shot simultaneously into the pit hole, which causes the armies to be killed. They tried to take root in a different area, but it was too late for them to survive. The prince is surrounded by enemy forces and is almost killed when Darian steps in to save him. He does this to keep his promise to Varys, which he made when they first met. Surprisingly, Carlin makes a move to kill the prince. On the verge of defeat, Carlin tries to take Arslan's life. Fortunately, Darian comes to his aid, and Arslan decides to flee. Meanwhile, the king is compelled to flee after the death of the other armies, and he tries to relay the word to others. But Carlin's evil collaborator is able to silence the messengers. As part of his plan to depose the king, Carlin orchestrates the entirety of the conflict. After taking the route of retreat, the king and Varys make their way back to town, only to find that they have been betrayed by an advancing Lusitanian army. Varys charges forward to protect the king, and kills a few of the Lusitanian armies successfully, but in the end, gets killed by the silver-masked man who seeks revenge on Andragoras and his people. The king is troubled as even his armies are shot down by unforeseen arrows. Meanwhile, the silver-masked man is hell-bent on seeking his revenge. He claims that after waiting for it for the past 16 years, he can get his revenge on Andragoras. The kingdom of Pars is attacked by the Persians and loses many men in defense. After some time has passed, Darian and Arslan come face to face with Narcissus, a powerful warlord. When they meet, he greets them with open arms when they arrive. On the other hand, Carlin delegates his men to search for Darian and Arslan, after they were reported to have been seen heading in the direction of Narcissus' abode. In a bid to save them from being captured, Narcissus is able to conceal them and pretend that he did not see anyone. The soldiers reveal to Narcissus the news that Varys has passed away, and Arslan and Darian, who have been hiding, are overcome with grief. After Narcissus vehemently declines the men's offer for him to join Carlin's army, they charge at him, unwittingly walking into his trap. After a great deal of convincing, Narcissus finally gives up and decides to assist the prince. Now allies, Prince Arslan heads out with Darian and Narcissus. Back in the camp, the Lusitanian army tortures General Shapur of Ecbatana right in front of his people. In response, General Shapur begs the people of Ecbatana to spare his face by killing him with their arrows, stating that he would prefer to die at the hands of his allies rather than his enemies. They attempt to aim at him, but due to the great distance, their arrows do not reach the area where he has been tied. As he dies, he is startled by the arrival of an arrow, with everyone wondering where the arrow had come from. Later, Arslan has a conversation with Narcissus. During this, he reveals to him that Ecbatana may collapse despite their strong defense. He confirms that all it takes to convince people are well-crafted words. The Queen Mother asks the two Marsmans if her husband, the king, was also beheaded, and they tell her that he was not. She is relieved to hear this news. The fact that the queen did not inquire about Arslan caused them a great deal of discomfort. Meanwhile, when Garshasp and Sam observe a slave listening to Lusitanian language, they correct the behavior of the slave. Shortly after, someone provides word that the slaves are causing a nuisance and are making efforts to unlock the gate. Garshasp becomes increasingly frustrated as he charges there, killing and injuring many slaves. Sam is concerned and offers his opinion that this could lead to even more uproar and wild attempts from them. Garshasp doesn't seem to care. Everything that Sam warns Garshasp about is starting to come true as the slaves turn violent and kill many civilians. Jeev is instructed by a high-ranking official to ensure the safe departure of the queen from the town. He finally concludes that she is not the queen and realizes the queen is one of her maids. The servant tries to flee, but the one with the silver mask intercepts her and kills her. The fact that the silver mask was able to sneak in meant that his armies had infiltrated. This causes an uproar in the city. Due to the uproar, the city of Ecbatana is taken, as the main gate is unlocked and an assault is launched. Arslan, Narcissus, and the others leave their place of residence to seek safety as the situation worsens. The Silver Mask takes over the palace and notices that the queen is nowhere to be found. He orders his soldiers to look for her. On the other hand, Eboil goes around disguised in Lusitanian soldiers' clothes as he looks to find out about the Lusitanian slaves. Shortly after, the soldiers are sent out to find the prince. While watching the soldiers march past him, he sees a girl being dragged by Lusitanian soldiers. Surprisingly, when he follows them, The girl had already killed the soldier by the time he gets there. The girl attacks him, and he demands to know who she is. In the heat of the fight, he takes off her scarf and realizes that she is in fact a boy. Apparently, this boy is Narcissus' servant, who had been sent by Arslan to check out the situation in the city. Meanwhile, Jeev encounters a stunning priestess who goes by the name Ferengis. She informs him that she was sent as an emissary by the royal family of Ekbatana and is in search of Prince Arslan. During this time, the Lusitanian army is still engaged in fierce combat and launched an assault on the villages to get to Arslan. However, Arslan and his allies plan to exact revenge on their adversary by attacking them. On Edoil's return from his mission, Arslan is given information about the events taking place in Ekbatana. Meanwhile, Jeev still follows Ferengis and is insistent on helping her in finding the prince, although he doesn't do this because he cares, but because of Ferengis' beauty. Arslan's plan seems to be going well as he attacks the enemy soldiers in an ambush. With so few numbers, they fight off the enemy, making them wonder how many soldiers he has with him. They can finish up the enemy and are informed that the king is alive. After the battle, Ferengis and Jeev finally find the prince and she reveals herself to him. Now with the prince, they all decide to infiltrate and spy around the city. Their main intention was to free the slaves. Later that night, while Darian is walking about the city, he meets the Silver Mask and they fight. The fight gets more and more intense, and during it, Darian hits the Silver Mask away from the face of the one who wears it, revealing his identity. Apparently, he has a burn on his right eye, forcing him to wear the mask. Realizing that his identity has been revealed, he fights Darian angrily. Fortunately for Darian, he is assisted by Narcissus, and together they escape. After completing their mission, Darian and Narcissus return to the prince, who is now holed up in a cave for his safety. In a bid to escape those who pursue them, Arslan and his companions seek refuge in the Karshan fortress. After some while, Arslan and his companions figure out that Lord Hadir hosted them for motives that were not entirely above suspicion. They decide to go the extra mile to offer the utmost protection against unforeseen occurrences. Fortunately, they can figure out the Lord's plans and fight off his attacks. Eventually, Darian kills Lord Hadir, forcing his men to stand down and let them go. Sam is taken captive by Lord Silver Mask, who is stunned to discover that Sam is still alive despite his severe injuries. Lord Silver Mask believed Sam to be dead. He is requested to serve the Silver Mask, but he categorically declines the offer. He swears that he will always be loyal to the King of Pars. Sam discovers the identity of the man behind the Silver Mask, which causes him to feel intimidated and reflect on what the other man had stated. Apparently, Lord Silver Mask is the previous King of Pars. Lord Silver Mask has a meeting with the son of Karlan, who gives him the assurance that he would get Arslan and Darian for him. Meanwhile, Arslan and his party get into trouble when they are ambushed. However, they go their separate ways, only to find each other again later. When Lusitanian soldiers are about to kill a lamb, Arslan comes to his aid and saves his life. After successfully outrunning the enemy, they decide to JPPP into a river. However, when the Lusitanian army approaches them, they find shelter behind a bush as the army approaches. The lamb is dissatisfied with the fact that Arslan risked his life to save a commoner like him. According to Arslan, this sort of behavior is perfectly natural between close friends. Without further issues, they proceed onward with their journey. Narcissus is running from the people that had waged war against him before. He runs in the direction of a mountain slope, paying attention to the insistent sound of riders, and he can identify who they were. Shortly after, he is surrounded by Lord Silver Mask's men. Lord Silver Mask identifies him as Narcissus. Meanwhile, Darian and Ferengis are occupied with trying to fight off the enemy soldiers who continuously attack them. While they fight, an evil demon aids the enemy and tries to harm the prince. However, a lamb saves the prince just as he is about to hit the ground. Angry that this demon dares to harm the prince, Darian attacks it and kills it. Prince Arslan is happy to be reunited with Darian, who is determined to make sure the prince lives long enough to achieve his goal. Watch this next video. See you on the next one.